This news will not come as any surprise to anybody. In carnivore circles, we often talk about, from the male health perspective, the collapse in testosterone that is measurable and has been measurable since the 1970s. And this is reported nearly every year by the media how it just the numbers in testosterone for men continue to drop like a rock and have been for 50 years. And they feign this not understanding how this happens, or worse, they propagandize us by telling us that red meat is the culprit when there are a number of other culprits that are likely to be the cause of this, including the increased use of seed oils, the increased presence of soy in the food, and the increased presence of plastics in the broader culture. Testosterone is in full collapse. It's in full free fall. And it almost looks like nothing that can be done about it. There's a new meta-analysis study that was published in a major medical journal, and it shows that this is not an American problem. This is a problem across all of the West, and what little data they can find from other places in Asia, South America, Africa, and the Middle East. This is a problem for all men everywhere. Now, if you don't know what a meta-analysis is, a meta-analysis takes published analyses and published studies, looks at their data, and sort of combines their data. It's a pretty complicated field of research. It's our research method to engage in a meta-analysis, and they take a long time to do, partially because you have to gather all your studies and make sure the studies are actually scientifically valid in the first place, and then combine the data and run them through some pretty complex algorithms to actually get your data. What they find is that this is not an American problem. This is a problem everywhere where the research has been done, and where very little research has been done. What little has been done points to this being a problem in those places too, though they do put the caveat that there needs to be more research in Africa and South America and other places. Where does that leave us? Well, the preliminary data shows that there's been a 50% decline in testosterone for men on average in the last 50 years. That young men, we'll say men in their 20s, have testosterone levels akin to men in their late 50s now. And that goes a long way to explaining a lot of social ills we have, but also to increased health problems. What are some of the big drivers of this? Well, this is a carnivore channel, so I'm going to tell you, to give you the party line here, a lot of this has to do with an improper human diet. The human beings are not eating what we should be eating. We're eating increased amounts of, processed junk, things that are not fit for human consumption. There's more soy and corn in our food than ever before. More people eat processed foods than ever before. And it's little wonder that these things happen. We know that soy has things like phytoestrogens and other things in them. Well, these are also present. A lot of these kind of chemicals are also present in plastics, and there are more plastics out there than there have ever been before. We live in a time where more and more people are trying to switch away from eating meat, even though the actual meat consumption seems to be on the rise. At least there's more push for people to switch from eating meat to eating plant-based foods, and that drives down testosterone. There's an interesting meme out there. This is a constant thing you see. I'll show on the screen here just one title of such an article here. It's a claim that, study says eating red meat causes testosterone to fail or to collapse. And then you read the actual details, and they tell you things like, we took men who were eating standard American diet, processed foods, and red meat, and found they had lower testosterone than the average person. And they don't do various controls. So, for instance, if I were running the study, an honest way to do the study would be to take that group and have them be one group. Another would be a group of people who eat a mostly plant-based diet, but are still, basically eliminate the meat entirely, but are still eating a lot of processed foods and the other things. And then another group that is on a low-carb ketogenic diet, like a Mediterranean Thomas DeLauer style keto diet, where it's whole foods, very little to no processed junk. Okay, and then we'd have, maybe find another control group if we needed to. And that's how we would check their testosterone, and we'd also use some other control measures, of course, to make sure that they don't have any health issues otherwise that are keeping them, that will corrupt our data here. But these studies never do that. They just see red meat, and it doesn't occur to them that these food items with laundry list length ingredients lists are the problem. Sure, is there a place in life for processed foods? Of course. I mean, if you live in any part of the country prone to storms that might keep you in your house for weeks at a time, like say where I live, yeah, there's a place for that. Having a pantry that's stocked so that if the power goes out, you can still eat. Yeah, there's a place for that. But for most things and for most of us, we should be eating things that have one ingredient, two ingredients, real food, identifiable food that you don't have to go onto Google to figure out what these, 15 syllable ingredients are. We should be able to identify what we're eating, and we're not. And the studies for causing all these health problems that we've been having for the last 50, 60 years, heart disease, obesity, rising, like celiacs, no one ever heard of that before 50 years ago, all these things, they usually avoid the question of processed foods. And why is that? And it's because this goes back to one of the major problems in the research, the fields of research, and that is that the research is being done by universities most of the time. And these are university departments that are doing this. So you'll have agriculture departments or health departments or whatever doing this research. Well, where do they get their funding from? Yes, in some part they get it, of course, from the university in the form of salaries and things, and that comes from, tuitions and fees and things. But where else does it come from? Well, it comes from grants, and it comes from, money that's awarded to them from these big food industries, big agriculture. And they push often the line that goes in keeping with their funders, and it corrupts the research system. And this is why, like, most of us can look and say, we can see that testosterone is not torpedoed by eating red meat. I mean, look, how many of you had your blood work done when you started keto or carnivore, and then had it done another, like, a year later, and you'd been very good, you stayed on program, and your testosterone stayed the same or whatever? How many of you? Bet you it's most of you. How many of you have had, most of your health maladies fixed by embracing a carnivore lifestyle or a keto lifestyle? Probably most of you. Why? Because you're eating something that's much closer to a proper human diet than anything that these studies are promoting. The absolute worst thing you can do for your health, aside from using controlled substances or things like that, is to go on a plant-based diet. Unless you are one of those really rare people where your doctor says, look, if you don't do this, you'll die. Obviously, there are people in that position in life. I won't discount that, but they're rare. Most of us, come to these diets to avoid having that conversation with our doctor. And most of us report all sorts of things, all sorts of improvements to our life. So when we see that testosterone is collapsing, one of the takeaways from this is that by like mid-century, which is not that far from now, if you're a younger person, you will live to see this probably, okay? By mid-century, they're expecting that men will not be able to father children without scientific help. Think about that for a second. This is great news for all the, for all the, people who tell us that there's too many of us and that most of us, don't contribute anything to society. And so we all got to go. There's too many eaters here. Most of those people think this is going to be good news. This is why they don't do anything to fix the problem, part of it. And the other part of it is most of them make their money through processed foods. You've got that guy buying up all the farmland in America. He's an advocate for plant-based eating. Why do you think that is? There's ideology behind there, and there's the bottom line behind there, and there's potential for real power behind there. That's what this is about. The prospect that we won't be able to have children by the end of by mid-century, if these trends continue, should concern everyone. But it doesn't. You don't hear people talking about this. And why is that? Aside from there being the distraction of the day. I mean, come on. I mean, if you've been paying attention to the news the last week, there's some really silly stuff going on that distracts people. This is if you'll pardon the expression, a meat and potatoes problem. This is a very basic, everyday problem for people. And why do we know that? Because there's tons of money in testosterone replacement. And I don't mean like Liver King testosterone replacement. I mean like just the typical thing that the average middle-aged and older man has to get just to function properly. There's a lot of money in that. And the whole point of a carnivore diet or a keto diet is to prevent that. This is why I actually keep an eye on Dr. Sean Baker's organization, Rivero, because they want to address medical problems by getting people off of medication and through doing it through lifestyle and nutrition intervention. That is key. It's not a whole lot of money in that either. So this is why I think we're seeing what we're seeing, and we're reaping the whirlwind for this. What do you think quality of life will be like for most people in most places if we get to a place where you need to have a laboratory help you to have the children you want? What's the quality of life going to be? If you listen to guys like Elon Musk, they tell you that we don't have enough people to keep civilization going, that we're heading towards a demographic collapse. This data seems to back him up. I'm not a big fan of his on a lot of things, but he's not wrong here. He's not wrong here at all. This is where we're headed. And the powers that shouldn't be don't seem to care, or worse, are making it worse. I think the latter is true, that they are actually pushing for this stuff. Because you see this, you see these pictures come out from their conferences where they tell us to stop eating meat and they push plant-based things, and they try to use policy to do it, or they use big business to institute these sort of scoring systems that make it so you might not be able to buy meat, or if you do, you won't be able to travel because you've used all your credits and all this other stuff. They sit there, have dinner, listening to someone say the world should switch to a plant-based diet while they eat their filet mignon topped with lobster. The hypocrisy would be stunning, except they're not hypocrites because they don't believe that those rules apply to themselves. You may think that that's hypocrisy, but they don't, because they are the elite, and they believe the elite don't have to follow the same rules as everybody else. And they have their ideological reasons for that. Notice that all their solutions to everything gives them more power. That's really what this is about, folks. So what can you do if your testosterone is failing? Cut the carbs out. Cut the processed foods out. Stop smoking. Have your alcohol consumption be something that's a rare thing. That is a truly like special occasion thing. I'm not the guy who's going to tell you that on your wedding anniversary or Christmas dinner or whatnot, whatever your special days are of the year, that having a few carbs and a glass of wine or whatever is inappropriate. I'm never going to be the guy to tell you that, right? If we had a more balanced approach like that as a culture and as a people, we probably wouldn't have these problems now. But in your day-to-day life, cut those carbs out. Get down to as close to zero as you can. Eat more red meat. Exercise. Get out there and move around the bare minimum that we're told that we should be walking around. What was it, 10,000 steps a day? At the very least, get to that and see how you feel. I'm not telling you to go become a jogger or a marathon runner, but go get basic exercise. Start there. Get moving to a baseline level. Then after that, start a very rudimentary, basic, heavy lifting thing. And by heavy's relative. Like, if the idea of curling a 20-pound dumbbell with one hand seems like a monumental feat to you, and that's where I started many years ago, fix it. Your human body is built to be stronger than that. Okay? But get to a point where you're doing some basic lifting and some basic moving around. Eat right, stop smoking, have the drinking down to a rare occasional treat, and those will probably boost your testosterone. And I suspect there's also ideology behind this too, like testosterone levels, and because ideology dictates how you live your life. It really does. It really influences heavily your worldview. Your worldview says how you will interact with the world. You got to get all that stuff correct too. That's not the purpose of this channel. But at least get yourself moving, get your nutrition right, please. That will do more than anything else. Later in this week, I hope to cover microplastics, because they're a huge part of this problem. They deserve their own video. So let me know what you thought of this in the comments, please. And are you surprised at all that testosterone is failing? The elites don't know what's going on, or they do, and they just feign that they don't know what's going on, and that they try to say it's red meat that causes this, when really all their studies leave the standard American diet in place instead. So let me know what you thought of this in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It really does help. Sharing this on social media helps enormously too. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore. Thanks for tuning in.